We're now joined by our SABC Head of Research, Dr. Ronesh Dhawraj. I hope I don't butcher your surname again. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. Just ahead of that announcement, the much anticipated announcement, Doctor, I think it's very pivotal that we look at, the DA and its history of its past elections. Yesterday, yes, we did touch on the issue when the Democratic Alliance was still the Democratic Party. In 1994, they got 1.73% of the vote. How has the party been doing over these past years?
Well, thanks, Natasha. Always a pleasure being with you. Obviously, the Democratic Alliance was the Democratic Party before. The last leader of the Democratic Party actually was Tony Leon. It was Tony Leon and Helen Zille before it, rebranded back in 2000. But just to take you back, the Democratic Alliance, the Democratic Party, has its roots in the Progressive Federal Party, and the last leader of that party was, of course, Dr. Zach de Beer. And soon after the 1994 all-race elections in South Africa, he stepped down, and that's when Tony Leon stepped in. Tony Leon served as Democratic Party leader right until November 2006, if I recall correctly, and he resigned, and then soon after, May 2007, it was Helen Zille that was elected with an overwhelming majority of 72% of that ballot. Her contenders at that time was the veteran that you spoke to earlier, Joe Sedemane, and Tata Joe Sedemane. Also in that race was Athol Trollip from the Eastern Cape. Obviously, they lost that race. Helen Zille went on to win 2 extra terms back in 2010 and 2012. And then another seminal moment, one of 3 seminal moments in the DA's history, was in 2015. The first black leader of the party emerged. That was Mmusi Maimane. And very interestingly, in that election, he ran against a very highly respected Democratic Alliance member, that was Dr. Wilmot James. Obviously, he lost that race to Mmusi Maimane, but the majority that Mmusi Maimane actually won in that election was 89%. He won approximately 1,244 votes from all delegates present at that conference, and Dr. Wilmot James, he was very gracious in all of that. He went on stage, he hugged Mmusi, and now, as we know, he's teaching overseas. I think he's teaching somewhere in the US. Then obviously what happened in 2019, bad election results, the first electoral decline for the Democratic Alliance in post-apartheid South Africa. There was a report, and I think it's very important for all of us to look back at that report. What exactly happened? The DA leader, Mmusi Maimane, commissioned this report, and he got 3 leaders of the party to actually look into the reasons why the party had its first electoral decline. And that panel review report, by the way, John Steenhuisen, in his address earlier on as federal leader, he touched upon this panel review report. And I think it's very important for us to actually go through some of the points of that panel review report, because not many people know exactly what those 3 people said. It was Tony Leon, former DPDA leader. It was Ryan Coetzee, the former CEO of the Democratic Alliance, and Michelle Leroux. So apart from the leadership recommendations that they did make, they also found issues of, there was an atmosphere of fear of people speaking out within the, within the party between 2015 to 2019. They also discovered there's a sense of hierarchy. There's a sense of authority being, people being subjected to in the corridors where the DA was, especially in Parliament. There was no empathetic leadership, they also highlighted. They also picked on the disjuncture between national and provincial structures of the party. People were very reluctant to come forward and raise their hand, raise their voice. They also spoke about social media and its destructive qualities. Here, obviously, we're referring to leaders who had spats over Twitter, over Facebook. Diane Kohler-Barnard, highly respected DA member, DP member as well. Helen Zille, the infamous colonialism tweets in 2017, and a few of the other leaders. Then they also spoke about, in that report, leaks to the media. When the DA had those meetings in those caucuses, it was leaked to the media. For what reason, no one knows. And, those stories were always in the Sunday papers, the Friday morning newspapers. And then very importantly as well, when there were issues within the party, when there were disputes, when there were issues of ill discipline, the race card always was something that was raised. You are victimizing me because I am this color, or you are victimizing me because this other person is a white person, I'm a colored person, you're an Indian, something like that. But I think the essence of that report, towards the end of the recommendations, in terms of leadership, they said there is a chasm between leadership and the party supporters, the party faithful. And they made recommendations that the leadership has to resign. The leadership has to step down and make way for a new leadership. They even called for a new federal Congress. That did not happen at the time. But I think very importantly, what happened at the time, the Federal Council chair, that was James Self. I think he served 18 years. He was due for retirement anyway, so he stepped aside. Then the CEO of the party at the time was Paul Bowie. He also resigned, and it was only natural for the leader of the party. The party lost nationally electoral results, 470,000 decline nationally. In all provinces, they declined. A couple of the provinces, they actually had mild increases. Northern Cape, Free State, and KZN, I think it was 10,000 votes or so. So it was only natural. It was expected that Mmusi Maimane had to resign. But obviously the allegation since then has been Mmusi Maimane actually abandoned the party. But, from where I'm sitting from a research perspective, it was expected that he had to resign. He had to step down. He could not hold on to that position because it probably would have been untenable for him. So that report is very important, and I'm kind of glad that the incumbent leader, actually touched upon that, when he addressed delegates at this conference earlier.
And you speak about the political report. I'm so glad that you actually took us through that report before Mmusi Maimane stepped down in 2019. Quite scathing, though, against the former leader of the DA, Mmusi Maimane. It also brings me back to the point where Tony Leon had called Mmusi Maimane a failed experiment. Let's talk about that.
When we look at the news reports, the context of why Tony Leon said what he did. I think he was launching his book at the time, and he said the media is taking it out of context. Even Helen Ziller, who was speaking to Iman Rapesi yesterday, says the media is against the DA for some reason. It's anti-DA for some reason. There's this narrative in the media that is, just not pro-DA. But Tony Leon tried to justify why he said what he did. He says, I cannot understand, I cannot fathom, what's this big hoo-ha about the statement I made. It's just an opinion from my side, as a former leader, and then obviously he was one of the 3 people involved in that panel review report. Maybe the timing could have been better, but I think it was in bad taste, if you look in hindsight.
Just briefly, before we toss back to the studio, let's just get a brief background of the 2 candidates. Yesterday, they spoke about what they'd be bringing to the party. John Steenhuisen saying that he's got more experience. I mean, he was the leader of caucus in his province, he was a DA leader in his province, the chief whip, and now he's a party leader. And Mpopalat is saying that, listen, I may not be that experienced, but I've got the qualifications and I'm capable.
Well, obviously, we know that Dr. Mpopalat took a negative swipe against John Steenhuisen, the matric scandal we all know about. He doesn't have a tertiary qualification like most of us sitting here at the SABC or probably in any other political party. The EFF has made it very fashionable for people to actually have PhDs, to have doctorates. So I think it was a swipe, it was a veiled attack against the sitting leader of the DA. But John Steenhuisen, he first went to Parliament in 2011. Before that, he was the provincial leader in KZN, a very instrumental province for the Democratic Alliance in terms of minority support. Huge Indian support in that province as well, huge Zulu support as well, and obviously to a certain degree huge coloured support as well. He also served as DA caucus leader in the KZN legislature, and amazingly he was only 22 when he was first a DA or a DP councillor at age 22. But I think his real branding, and he cemented his branding when he became the chief whip after the 2014 elections, and obviously after Mmusi Maimane was elected leader, he served under Mmusi Maimane as the chief whip in Parliament. So he supported Mmusi Maimane. I think that's where he solidified, he cemented his brand within the party. And the leader that we are seeing today that's going up against Dr. Mpopalat is, more than likely was shaped during those 5 years, I think, in that office. And obviously he stepped in when Mmusi Maimane stepped down in in October 2019. The Federal Council had met in October 2019, November. He was appointed as the interim leader. Then he was elected during COVID times in November 2020. He won that election against KZN Zimbali Ntuli. He won that vote with a huge majority, 80% to Ntuli's 20%. So if we look at Dr. Mpho Phalatse, she doesn't have the same gravitas that John Steenhuisen does. He moved through the ranks of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Alliance. Unfortunately, Dr. Mpho Phalatse does not have that advantage going to this election. Although the speeches were very convincing yesterday, but I think if you look at the cheers and the applause that Steenhuisen received compared to the kind of silence that Dr. Phalatse received yesterday, kind of tells you that it's probably a one-horse race, and we'll probably know in a couple of minutes that it's looking like a landslide victory for Steenhuisen.
Okay. Dr. Ronesh, thank you so much for your time. Always great speaking to you. Of course, that was our good doctor from the SABC, the head of research, giving us great analysis there.